name's Lucas. I am an alcoholic. My sobriety date's July the 28th of 2010, and for that small amount of time, I'm truly as grateful as I know how to be. Alcoholics Anonymous changed my life. And I wish I could stand up here and give you a master thesis on what AA has done for me and the people I choose to surround myself with. But I'd come up short time and time again. I'm going to be honest with you. For the past 5 minutes, I've been sitting in the front row, stewing with resentment. You guys have a coffee getter? I went to the coffee table twice and got my own coffee and got my own snack. I love you, but I don't like you right now. And I'm trying to get centered, and all I can think about is killing you. And it's the most profound thing. Yeah, seriously. The longer you stay here, the more those thoughts come. And I'm just kidding. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know what I'm doing here. I really don't have much of a story, but I really do love to tell it. And I hope you find that out at the end of this experience. When I came to Alcoholics Anonymous in 2010, I was 15 years old, and I'm now 28 years old. And I say that because it's indicative of two things. Number one, the disease of alcoholism affects anybody, regardless of their age, their race, their gender, their creed, or their religion. But more importantly, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And when I talk about the program, I'm talking about what it says and how it works. These are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. Those 12 steps work for anybody. And I had an experience where a young man walked me through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. He exacerbated the spiritual experience I had, led me through clear-cut direction to allow me to have a spiritual awakening, and showed me how to stay awake in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm also here to tell you that my sobriety has been nothing but a deeper level of surrender, followed by a deeper level of awakening. I wish I could tell you it's been like the Harry Potter movie where the phoenix rises from the ashes, because that stuff looks cool. But it's like the stock market. And if you've ever looked at the stock market, there's always these dips. And then there's these raises, dips and raises, dips and raises. And there's very minute ones as you go day by day. And that's what my life looked like today. And I'm here to tell you, when I have dips in my life today, it's because I wake up in the morning, I hit my knees, I pray to God, a God I choose to believe in, and I say things like, God, thank you for my life, thank you for the job, thank you for the money, thank you for the relationship, thank you for the education, thank you for the house, thank you for putting me in a position where I no longer need you and I can run the show again. And that's where I experience those dips. But when I have those peaks in my sobriety in my life, it is simply because I talk to my sponsor and he suggests something to me. He tells me to bring something to God. I bring something to God. He tells me to take action that I don't think correlates with the experience that I'm having. And all the way on the back end, at the end of that, the thing I initially call about that I'm worried about instantaneously gets solved. And I find myself sitting down in prayerful thought and meditation at the end of the night thinking, he was right again. But I'm not going to tell him. I just can't. And that's it for me. That's really it for me. I can tell you, though, before I ever took a drink, I was what Bill described as suffering from anxious apartness. It talks about in the New Pair of Glasses with Chuck Chamberlain, what I yearn for is conscious connection. What I suffer from is conscious separation. What I feel like is if there's a world with everything in it, I'm always on the outside. And the best way I could describe that for anyone who knows is, remember when I was younger, when we all were younger, there was that episode of SpongeBob, the first time that SpongeBob and Patrick went over to Sandy's dome, and all they had to do was walk through the front door. But the whole episode, they do everything but try and walk through the front door. They try and break through, they try and dig under, they try and rappel down, they try and bulldoze straight through. And then when they finally get in after using the front door, instead of laying aside their pride, instead of laying aside what they think they know is right and saying, hey, we need some water, they just sit there and they shrivel up and die. And that's what happens to a guy like me, bouncing in and out of AA from ages 12 to 15. In the process of drinking, staying sober, drinking and staying sober, I come in physically sober. And physically sober does not feel good. It looks good, right? My family's happy that I'm not drinking again. My friends are happy that I'm not drinking again. The people in my life that put barriers and parameters on the way that I need to conduct myself are happy that I'm not drinking, because they don't understand that I suffer from an illness which is spiritual in nature. They think that I lack goodwill, that I lack the strength to make right decisions. And they're always telling me, you just need to stay on the wagon. I don't know what that means. You just need to put the plug in the jug, Lucas. You just need to not drink no matter what. And those three things are some of the most fundamental, sound things that I heard when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. Don't drink no matter what. Put the plug in the jug. And when people were telling me that, they weren't trying to kill me. But I can't just not drink because I drink no matter what. And you're telling me not to drink no matter what. And it wasn't until I had this experience where I slithered into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have never seen someone high-step it into the rooms of A after a big bender. Just walk like, they're going to come in like 15 minutes late, kick open this front door, I'm back! And not only did I drink, but I was able to be alcoholic and happy at the same time. And you guys told me I could. Never seen it. I've usually seen people come in here, head buried, their chin buried in their chest, can't look people in the eyes. They just kind of shuffle their feet to the back as the meeting starts, and they shuffle their feet out at the end before someone can grab them after the Lord's Prayer. And that's what I did, as I slithered into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous shortly after July 28th of 2010, which is my sobriety date. And I stopped saying things like, well, you just don't understand. Okay, I hear what you're saying, but that's not going to work for me. What I kept trying to figure out is how could I be physically sober at the same time while being physically intoxicated at the same time? That's a good thought. It's physiologically impossible. That's what I keep wrapping my head around. And every time I come to AA, I think people are going to tell me how to do that. But all you guys talk about is God and the 12 steps, and it's really weird, and it's extremely uncomfortable. And before I could have that experience, obviously, like I said, there's this 3-year period of me just drinking and train wrecking my life. And, this idea of being apart from every aspect of my life propelled me to my first drink. My first drink was behind the woods at Goucher College in Towson, Maryland. When anyone asks, I always say that I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. It's like, oh, where are you from? I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. And typically people are like, so is it like The Wire where you live? And it's not at all. It's really nice. I live in Towson, which is like an upper middle class area, very suburban. I'm the softest guy here in this room. And so I don't want you to be like, we had this speaker from Baltimore. He was so tough, man. Just not your guy. And what happens is I find myself, like I said, behind the woods at Goucher College in Towson, Maryland with Monica, Trevor, and Brendan. Brendan's the funniest guy to go to school with. He just has this way about him. He walks in every day on Monday and he has this electric story to tell everybody that they just can't wait to hear about it. Everyone laughs. Trevor's the best looking guy I go to school with, and he's the most athletic guy I go to school with. And I just I had aspirations of being a superstar athlete, but I got stuck in a fat kid's body. I didn't have the luxury he had. And then Monica, she was just a girl. I mean, women in my life before I ever took a drink was the most puzzling thing. I didn't know what you did. All you did was say hello and be normal. But I don't understand that. And my thought process is if these three know who I really am, that they'll want nothing to do with a loser like me. And the only reason I'm convinced of that is for the longest time I've wanted nothing to do with a loser like me. And I remember we sit in this kind of half semicircle like you see here, and out from Brendan's black Jansport backpack comes this lukewarm, sweaty bottle of Mad Dog 2020. I love that. Yeah. When I drink Mad Dog 2020, I become empowered. When my family hears about me drinking Mad Dog 2020, they become embarrassed. Two polar opposite effects. When I came to the meeting tonight, Tori and I drove up from Towson, and we walked to the front door, and there were 4 individuals there that greeted us and they welcomed us. We walked to the second terrace here. There were 2 individuals who greeted us and welcomed us. And as we got to the top, there were 2 individuals here that greeted us and welcomed us to this meeting. We knew we were in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Sometimes you don't know you're in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, but if you mention things like Mad Dog 2020, Wild Irish Rose, Thunderbird, people start making really weird sounds like, oh, yeah, like sketchy porn noises. And you guys have watched porn recently? Let me reframe that. The halfway house people have watched porn recently, and I know I'm with my people. And what happens is I take a drink, and as I told you, when I drink, I have an allergic reaction, which really what that means is I have an abnormal reaction. I become empowered by the drink. I take a drink, and I take another drink, and another drink, and another drink, and another drink, and it happens. And what happened, it talks about in the doctor's opinion, the sensation is so elusive. That first sensation I had, that first experience, the first time I got drunk, I mean, it was unbelievable. And that might not be your experience. You might have had your first drink and just been like, God, this is terrible. I'll never do this again. And I'm here to tell you, I'm not here to share my expertise in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm here to share my experience, and that's solely my experience. And I had this psychic change, my first spiritual experience, you could say. I had this sudden shift in perspective that went from, if Monica, Trevor, and Brendan knew who I really was, they want nothing to do with a loser like me, to, you guys are so lucky I'm here right now. And I gave up nothing to be here, and you need to know that. And what I proved, nothing. What I changed, nothing. But to me, everything was different. And I remember coming to that next morning, and nothing changed. I was still the same old guy. I was still unathletic, not funny, and didn't know how to talk to women. But I realized that I had found something that had allowed me to experience something that I thought was so just out of reach my entire life. And I didn't chase it to the gates of insanity or death, as you'll hear described later on in the book. But I drank anytime I had the feasible opportunity to drink, and I'll pay whatever price it takes to drink. And the best way I can describe my drinking is what it says in the doctor's opinion. It says men and women drink essentially because they like the effects produced by alcohol. I drink to get right. I wake up 10 degrees off from where everyone else is in the world. And when I drink, I start to find myself back on an even playing field with everybody. But what happens is the more I do that, the more I wake up off, and when I try to get back, the more off I land. And just as a reference point for any nautical expertises in here, if we were a degree off sailing out of a ship from New York Harbor on the way to London Heathrow, where we would land is in the south of France, in wine country, in a place where we don't speak the language, in a place where all they do is drink. We'd be in trouble. And it says, the sensation is so elusive that while they admit is injurious, after a time they cannot differentiate the true from the false. What does that mean for someone like me? It means I can't tell the truth in my own life. It means I'll rationalize or make any one of 100 different excuses why it's acceptable for me to drink the way that I drink and live the kind of life that I live. That mental obsession, that sound ideal with that insane trivial excuse of why it's okay to drink. That stuff always happens in my life, and the insane trivial excuse to drink always wins out, and I drink again and again and again and again. And what happens is during this 3-year period of 12 to 15, I found myself in and out of detoxes, detention centers, psych wards, just wind-up joints. My sponsor turned me on to that, wind-up joints, places that I wind up when I drink. They're many and varied. And I have the same experience over and over again. Alcoholics Anonymous is brought in. I'm forced to go to meetings. I'm forced to get a slip signed. And I have the same experience over and over again. I walk in. Good standing members of Alcoholics Anonymous put a big book in front of me and say, hey, look, Lucas, this is what we have to offer. If you don't want it, we just can't help you. I mean, they just didn't mince words with me. And that's the instruction that I'm given here, is not to mince words with anybody. Hey, if you're going to take the action, let's do it. If you're not, it's okay. We just can't help. And I would have that oligarchical excuse about how I was different, about how alcoholism didn't affect me, and about how I was just a passerby. Who's a passerby in Alcoholics Anonymous? And then it describes me physically sober, removed from a solution. They're restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can experience the sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by taking a few drinks I see others taking with impunity. I'm physically sober, and my life gets worse, like I said, not better. And I feel like I can scratch my skin off. And my sponsor describes it as, if there's a spring in your chest, if you twist a spring enough, it's going to pop. And that's what happens. I just pop. And what happens is I can only hold my breath for so long underwater. Eventually I have to come up and catch breath. And when I come up to catch breath, the only thing I know how to do, the only relief, because think, I don't know freedom, I know relief. The only relief I know is to drink. And I go and I drink. And I drink under the illusion that I just need a singular drink to take the edge off. I don't drink to take the edge off, I drink to put the edge on. The phenomenon of craving develops. Right, then I pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. I take a few drinks, I get intoxicated. I have this phenomenon which is not descriptive of every member of Alcoholics Anonymous, but when I drink, sometimes I have these euphoric recalls where I remember cell phone numbers, I call people and ask them if they have drugs. And not everyone has that experience, some do. And that's the last I'll say on that. And it says this is repeated over and over unless they can experience an entire psychic change. There's very little hope of his recovery. Right? Unless a guy like me can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of my recovery. Dr. Silkworth tells me that alcoholism is a fatal illness. I'm decreed an alcoholic death. If I don't have an experience, spiritual in nature, if I don't apply these principles to my life, get and stay sober, I will drink again. And for me to drink is for me to die. And the alcoholic death looks different from everybody. I don't know how long, how short, how fast, how painless, how painful it's going to be. And if you're here right now and you're one of the people that picked up one of the lower month chips or the 24-hour chip, and you think that I'm up here trying to convince you that if you don't stop drinking, you're going to die, I'm not. You're not convinced until you're convinced you're going to drink and die. And that just happens over and over again. And as the years go on, I'm willing to pay a price much deeper and much deeper and much deeper. If I walk into a bar and if I ask for a drink, and let's say alcoholism is the bartender, the first thing I'll pay with is things like my education, my aspirations, my relationships, familial in nature, intimate in nature. And I'll just give those things up. I'm not one of the people that says, when I was out there drinking, I lost my family. Because that implies that if I lifted up a rock, I would find them. I knew where they were. They knew where I was. I made the choice to sacrifice those relationships to live the kind of life that my mind told me I had to live. And towards the end of my drinking, I pay with the only thing that I know how to pay with. I pay with my dignity, my morality, my self-respect. And when I pay with those things, I'm willing to engage, participate, and bear witness to some unspeakable atrocities. And what I can tell you is on July 27th of 2010, I came to after what was just another night of drinking. It wasn't anything abnormal from the night before. And I came to, and I had a moment of grace. And the moment of grace was, you need to stop drinking. You need to figure something out. The thing is moments of grace are like windows that don't have a shutter in between them. They will slowly close. I had that thought, and it might have felt like maybe several minutes later, I had another thought come into my head. Lucas, that is the worst idea you've ever had. And I'm just, okay, that's the worst idea I've ever had. AA's for quitters. People that stop drinking are weak-willed. The classics. The classics we hear in a treatment center in the back of the room where they're like, dude, I'm not staying sober. And what happens to me is maybe an hour later, I do what I always have to do. I pay whatever price I have to pay to get right, and I'll deal with whatever consequences tomorrow. And on the early afternoon of that day, July 27th of 2010, I paid a price to drink, and as a result, a young man was murdered, and I had to answer for that. And I just can't swipe that stuff away. I just can't live with that stuff. I can't just kind of walk away and wipe my hands clean and think, well, this is just going to handle itself. July 28th of 2010, I came to in a hospital bed, and I experienced the desperation of drowning men. Not convinced, hey, let's call those people in AA that I had met several years ago. I realized that something needed to change. But I also realized at the same time that I didn't want to stop drinking because it's the only life that I had known. But I needed to stop drinking because if I didn't, my life was going to get significantly worse than it had already gotten. And what happens in my life? I slither my way back into Alcoholics Anonymous. I slither my way back into Alcoholics Anonymous, and I show up to these meetings. And the only thing I'm concerned about is not going to jail. I'm concerned about getting out from under what's just transpired. I'm concerned about how I can just avoid every issue that's come my way. I'm not worried about taking the 12 steps. I'm not worried about having a loving, enduring, and growing relationship with the God of my understanding. I'm here to get the heat off my back. I'm here so you sign a slip, and if you don't sign a slip, I'll sign it myself. But under the crux and the pain that if I drink again, I'm in trouble, so I need to stay sober. And I bounce in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous for about 6 months. I have to go serve time in an institution for the wrongdoings of my life, and I wind up getting sent home to Baltimore or Towson, Maryland, where I'm from. And I show up to my home group, the home group that I've been a member at since I've been sober, since I've been back in Towson, which is a 6-day group of Alcoholics Anonymous. We meet Saturday nights, 8:30 p.m. in Towson, Maryland. It's a big young people's meeting. If you've ever been to a young people's meeting, everybody talks, nobody listens, and but some of them stay sober. And I show up there, and if you know anything about young people's meetings, one thing that One thing that you hear is that they work young people's AA. I don't know what young people's AA is. I work AA. But what happens is there are people that work with others consider young people AA, and that's where they get clicked up with their friends. They see new people walk into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they do what guys like me have done in my life and in my sobriety. I look at guys like Ryan, and I expect him to get up and talk to the new person. I'm preoccupied cutting it up with my boys about where we're going to go to the diner after this, about how we have to go bowling after the meeting. Not worried about our primary purpose. Not worried about the guy who might come here for the first time and might never come back because he walked in and out without anyone putting a big book in front of him. But you see, at my home group at that time, there was Rick Turk. Rick Turk is a good standing member of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you hang out in AA, eventually you're going to have an experience where you're going to go out to some conference with your road dogs, or you're going to go to some big convention with your road dogs, and you're going to hear somebody give a talk on a 4-step, a 5th step. You're going to hear him talk about the 12th step. You're going to hear about Joe Schmo from Vegas or Mick Mack from Dallas, Texas. You're like, man, Mick Mack from Dallas, Texas gave the best AA talk I've ever heard in my life. I mean, he was walking on water up there. He had angel wings spring out from his back. And man, we've got some really good speakers in Alcoholics Anonymous, but that's not what we need in AA. We need good standing members. And this guy, Rick, is almost 40 years sober today. When I met him, he was 28 years sober. And Rick at the time was 62 years old. He had 4 stepchildren. He had 12 step-grandchildren. And this man embodied Alcoholics Anonymous. He worked at a part shop for the MTA. He was from the water side of Maryland, Dundalk. And on the outside looking in, me and him had nothing in common. This is not someone I would approach on the streets and say, hey man, we look like we would get along really well. But what happened is I walked into that meeting and I sat all the way in the back and I looked as angry as I could. Just like forcing myself to frown, crossing my arms and, squeezing my body or what muscles I had as hard as I could to make sure that you knew I didn't want to be messed with. And then in comes Rick, and all these people pass me by, and Rick comes right up to me and he introduces himself, because that's what good standing members of AA are taught to do. If you're new here and you've introduced yourself as new, you've done everything you've needed to do up to that point. It is now up to all the people in the room to come talk to you. When I was sitting in the front row, I'll give him a pass. My buddy here who was supposed to make the coffee, the barista, he was talking to the young man here about sponsorship in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I wanted to interrupt and be like, look, he can live a couple minutes. I need some coffee. But that's what we do here. That's what we do here. And that's what Rick did. He came up to me and he said, hey man, I haven't seen you here before. My name is Rick Turk. What's your name? And of course I'm angry, but I want to people please. And I answer him. I say, my name's Lucas. I just got released from this institution. I give him this big sob story. And he just goes, well, hey, me and my wife sit on the other side of the room and we have a space in between us if you'd like to sit next to us. Everything in me is screaming, say no, just say no. And I just say, yeah, okay, I'll go sit with you guys. And then he just goes, I'm going to go get some coffee. I'm like cream and a couple sugars. What's your poison? I've never drank coffee in my life up to this point. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm the same thing. And man, that's like jet fuel. And what happens is in that time, he got up, he went to the little cafeteria we have to make coffee, and I walked over, I sat next to his wife. His wife introduced herself to me. Rick came back with a cup of coffee for himself and a half cup for me, just out of respect. He didn't know if I was shaking or what was going on. And at the end of that meeting, Rick just had a conversation with me. He asked me what had brought me there. He asked me where I lived. And I told him that I lived just outside of Towson, Maryland. And he said, man, I live right there. He's like, let me circle some meetings and give you a milk route, and I'll come pick you up because you're right by me. Rick lived 30 minutes away from me. Rick lived 30 minutes away from me, and he would come every day to pick me up and take me to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I don't play God, and I'm not here to tell you what could have happened, but I can tell you there's a good chance that if I went to that meeting and kept going to meetings like that where I walked in and I walked out, no one said a word to me, I probably would have hung myself because I was so scared to drink again because of what I was facing. but I didn't want to live the life that I was living at that current moment because it was so miserable. It was worse than when I was drinking. And that guy, Rick Turk, I don't know if I've ever heard him speak at a meeting for more than 3 minutes. I've never heard him pontificate the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous like you hear some of the big shot members of Alcoholics Anonymous do. But I can tell you, he gave the best demonstration of Alcoholics Anonymous I've ever seen and I will ever see in my life, bar none that day. And he allowed me to get to my first sponsor in Alcoholics Anonymous. Rick wasn't my sponsor, he was my chauffeur for the longest time. And he took me, and I met my first sponsor, and when I first got sober, I thought I needed a sponsor I could relate to. And then I realized I could relate to a squirrel on a branch. I needed a sponsor I could obey. And my first sponsor, I thought he needed to be like some young, really attractive, like super wealthy guy, because I was a young bull from Towson, Maryland. And my first sponsor was a mid-30s gay guy from Hereford, Maryland, which is like farm town, Maryland. God was like, this will do for you now. And thank God, because what Rob did is he walked me through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, page by page, line by line. When it asked a question, he made me answer it. When it said pray, we prayed. When it said write, we wrote. And he did the best he could with what he had. And what he had was me, which was not much. And what I can tell you is when we sat down to go through that book, we'd open up and, you hear people all the time at meetings, they read the 12 traditions and they get down to tradition 11 and 12. And they go, Ababa-dooba-doobity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions. And when I first got sober, I did not know how to read. And I would sit there and go through the big book, and the big book reads about 5th grade level. And I was ashamed to say that I had mastered that level. And I would sit there and read that book, and I'd come up against words, and I would start slowing down and try and sound things out. And he would just calmly go, anonymity. And he would just read the words for me and let me keep going. And not once did he sit there and say, dude, how old are you? You're 16. You don't know how to read? What's wrong with you? He just filled in the gaps that God couldn't fill in to allow me to have a spiritual experience. He thrust me through the work of Alcoholics Anonymous. He showed me what it meant to write inventory. He showed me what it meant to cast aside my defects. He showed me what it meant to take an amends list and make approaches. He showed me what it was like to live in 10, 11, and 12. And what I'm here to tell you is the big issue I had when I first got sober is I thought that the only problem was alcohol. I didn't understand what God had to do with sex, God had to do with finances, God had to do with my familial relationships. I didn't understand that God had anything to do with anything outside of just not drinking. And when you live under that mindset and that circumstance, you're destined to pay a price in Alcoholics Anonymous. And what I can tell you is I stayed sober off the fumes of fellowship for 6 years. I stayed sober off the fumes of fellowships in Alcoholics Anonymous for 6 years, just hanging out, just going to meetings. Just doing the bare minimum. Just being one of those guys where I'd get uncomfortable just enough, I would take some action. And the moment I started to feel okay, I would stop. And that's not how I was sponsored. That's not how I sponsor today. You know, when I sit down with guys and we go through We Agnostics and it talks about God either is or he is and he's everything or else he's nothing, I always have to ask myself, as I read that to you, is that true in my life today? Is that true in my life today, that statement? And I'll be first to tell you that there have been plenty of times in my life where I can sit there and say, that statement has not been true in my life. And what happened for me is I got sober super young. I had somewhat of a crazy story. I got to do some cool things in AA. I was sober just long enough. I had an opportunity to start traveling and speaking in AA. I wasn't talking about anything but me. I'd have these experiences where I'd go to these meetings or some of these small little mini conferences, and I would be talking about the guy that I thought you wanted me to be and not the scumbag I actually was. And I'd sit there and go, God, thank God they don't know you're lying. And thank God you don't have to make amends. And just my life got shallower and shallower and shallower. I was sponsored by name. I sponsored people by name. And that keeps me loosely tethered to Alcoholics Anonymous. Guys I sponsor would call me. They say, this is what's going on in my life. And I'd think, I think you should try this. And not that I had any experience with it, but it's like, let's lab rat them, see if it works. And some of them are still sober, thank God. And you had to clean that up, obviously. But my life just got dimmer and dimmer. I thought that Alcoholics Anonymous was about worldly things. I talk about the amount of money I had, the education I had, the job that I had, the relationship that I had. And I would get up to podiums of Alcoholics Anonymous and I would entertain. That's what I would do is I would entertain. I'd tell some really cool jokes. I'd tell some really funny stories. Some people would laugh. People that were members of AA would hate me because they'd be like, this guy's so full of crap. And I'd never let you get close enough so you could expose me. And in one foul year, I lost everything. I lost my job. I lost all my money. I was kicked out of college because I just did something heinous and disgusting. I'd lost a relationship that I had valued and nurtured because of my sex conduct in and outside of the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm the type of scumbag that shows up to a meeting of AA and talks about how long he's been sober and preys on new women. Okay, that's the type of guy you got standing here before you today. And I'm not proud to say stuff like that. But I'm not going to lie to people in Alcoholics Anonymous because I have no right to do that. And it's so much more than the fact that I don't want to drink again. It's so much more than that. And the light in my life just got dark enough. And I can tell you what happens. I go to a men's retreat every summer in June. And it was a couple days before we go to this men's retreat. And I bellied up next to my bed. And I sat and I hit my knees and I prayed. And I said, God, if you don't put someone in my life this weekend, I'm going to leave Alcoholics Anonymous. You ever pray to God like that? Like you're going to lose your best player unless you start acting? And it never works. It never works except that one desperate time. And that one desperate time it worked for a desperate guy like me. And I went to this men's retreat, and my now sponsor, I'm sponsored by a man named Cliff. And my sponsor, Cliff, has done some really cool things in Alcoholics Anonymous. But the coolest thing he's always done for me is he's always given me his time. And that's what I need today is a sponsor that's going to give me his time. Not to manage my life, but because I call him on a regular basis. And I say things like, Cliff, I'm still delusional. Cliff, I've made this decision without consulting God or running it past spiritual sound advice. And this is what's happened. What do I do now? And I show up to this retreat on the brink of leaving Alcoholics Anonymous, and the first speaker gets up there and he starts talking about a kahog, a cat and a hog combined as a spiritual entity. And I thought, this isn't the guy. This is not the guy God sent me, the kahog guy. And then my sponsor gets up there and he just closes his eyes and he just looks at the room and he just goes, God's in restoration. And business is booming. And I thought, wow. If I'd have heard that any other day, any other moment in time, other than that moment right there and what had followed everything after that in that next hour, I don't know if I'd have been awake enough to hear it. I don't know if I'd have been broken enough to hear it. But I was broken enough to hear it, and I believed everything that guy said. I believed if I took the action that I had not been taking, that my first sponsor had told me to take, that maybe something will work. And sometimes people ask me, like, man, did your first sponsor, Rob, like, what happened to him? My first sponsor, Rob's still a dog in Alcoholics Anonymous. Like, he's the man. Sometimes we hear people say, yeah, I got a new sponsor. I needed a new sponsor. No, you didn't need a new sponsor. You needed to take some action. And I didn't take action, and I took the easier, softer way out and just got a new sponsor and blamed it on that. So please don't think Rob's a bad guy. And I sat with my sponsor, Cliff, and we started a vigorous course of action through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I could admit that I was powerless over alcohol, but I realized what unmanageability meant in step one. It brought a whole new reality to that aspect of my life. I can't manage my way out of a paper bag. You ever see the videos online with dogs in bags and what happens when they get in them? I mean, that's me, daily life occurrence. Me running the show. It's me against me. This idea of step two came to believe that a power greater than ourselves. That first second step experience I had a lot of old ideas and a lot of prejudice. And it talks about that. And I used to think prejudice was like a black-white thing. And really what it is it's old ideas. And I've got a lot of those. And my old ideas separate me from you and they separate me from God. And what I thought I heard when I was a kid is that I was going to get punished for everything that I do. And I come to A and you people say God could and would if he were sought. And my first objection is God could for people like you, but he wouldn't for someone like me. And then my sponsor starts to talk to me about the Wright brothers and Christopher Columbus. And, I'm a history major, I'm a history guy, and he just loves that. I mean, he'd just tear me up. He'd be like, tell me about Columbus. And really, in the most baseline of terms, Columbus went to the Queen of Spain, the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria, and there's back and forth, but really at the end of the day, Columbus took his voyage. Columbus took his voyage, and the people that allowed him to take his voyage, they didn't have hard scientific proof. They had a hinkling, but no scientific proof. And my sponsor just looked at me and goes, that's how I need you to feel about God. And I thought, wow, I'm waiting for something big to happen, and you're telling me that. And then it talks about the Wright brothers' childish faith. My whole life I've heard I needed to grow up. You need to grow up, Lucas. You need to grow up, Lucas. You need to grow up. I come to Alcoholics Anonymous and you tell me I don't need to grow up. You tell me I need to grow down spiritually. And what a concept that is. And the best way I can describe that is when I go down to Oklahoma, sometimes I have the experience of being with my sponsor, being with his family. And my sponsor helps raise his granddaughter. And, he shares his experience about him getting in the pool. And she'll run up to the edge of the pool and jump in. And he'll catch her. And she has an inflatable raft on and she has water wings on. She's not going to go under no matter how hard she tries. She's not going to drown. And he shares this experience about how every time before she jumps, she never stops and says, hey, do you promise to always catch me? Hey, do you promise to never let me down? Do you promise to always have my back? Not once. That childlike faith that they'll always be there, always catch, always have their back. That's a relationship that I was taught I need to have with God. I have a God that's not only loves me, but not only do I have a God that wants to get to know me, I have a God that's dying to get to know me. And that's not something I thought that I could have here. Step 3, this idea of making the decision, this keystone to the new and triumphant arc through which we pass to freedom. God's the teacher, I'm the student. He's the principal, I'm the agent. Get it straight. Step 4, this idea of writing inventory. My sponsor had me write inventory on a new level, and there was a lot of stuff on there I didn't disclose in my first inventory. And it talks about people, institutions, and principles. I'd never written a principles inventory when I got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. The 12 and 12 says that I live by a set of principles, spiritual in nature. So before I get sober and I can experience spiritual principles, I obviously live by principles that aren't spiritual in nature. And some of the principles that were on my my inventory that I did with my sponsor that I just want to touch on briefly is it's not okay to be intimate with other men. That was a big one on my principle. The reason I felt that way and what I told you is because I'm not gay. And that's some disgusting stuff to say, and that's disgusting rhetoric to use and disgusting ideology to think. And really the reason that I'm scared to be intimate with other men is I'm scared to tell another guy I love him. I'm scared to tell him about what's going on in my life, buck naked, and him go, whoa, brother, we don't do that in AA. And I let old ideas dominate my experience. I let old ideas keep me separated from you and keep me separated from God. And we continue to look deeper into this sex inventory. I always hear when I write inventory with guys, and the inventories that I've shared is sometimes I'll find myself saying, well, my part was that this person was alive at the same time that I was. And that checks your part. But it doesn't say that. It says, where were we at fault? Who had I harmed? And my sponsor made me look at some things I didn't want to look at. When I was out there train wrecking my life, I had dated a young woman, and we broke up because I'm constitutionally incapable of being honest with myself. And I'm constitutionally incapable of being honest with other people. And I was unfaithful when I was a disgusting human being. And what happened is we broke up. We were separate for about 3 years. She met another man and got engaged to get married. I slithered back into her life and convinced her that if she called off her engagement, that I would get back with her and I would give her the life that she wants. But in reality, I just didn't want to be alone. And I had her call that engagement off, and I had her go in front of her family and tell her family that she was calling that engagement off to get back with me, only a few weeks later to go back in front of her family to say, well, hey, actually, guess what? I'm just going to be single because Lucas and I aren't going to be together because he lied to me. And that's stone cold sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. So when I get to this A-step list and I look at who had I harmed, I just want to write her name. But my sponsor says things like, what about her parents? What about her brother? What about her nieces and her nephews? And I'm the big guy. It's like, well, it's going to cause more harm. Do they know you're a scumbag? Yeah, they know I'm a scumbag. You're not causing any more harm. And I'm a living amends type of guy. You ever meet those people, living amends, don't make direct ones? Yeah. That's what I try and be, is living amends type of guy. And that doesn't give me freedom. That doesn't allow me to experience what I can experience inside and outside of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he started pointing stuff out like that, and we start casting that stuff in 6 and 7. In 6, it says, are we now ready to let God? I've never been ready to let God do anything in my life, and now I'm in a position where I'm ready to let God do anything. 7, I say this prayer where I'm making a commitment. I'm making a commitment to serve. 8, I make this list. 9, I start making approaches. And then I have this experience in 10, 11, and 12, and I'll talk about that in this last 5 minutes I got, and then I'll shut up. It talks about in 10 that love and tolerance of others is our code. The code of the Japanese samurai is to dishonor themselves, family, or country. They got to kill themselves. When Bill Wilson talks about what code is, that's what I think of. Love and tolerance of other people is my code. Okay, there's no taking days off in Alcoholics Anonymous where it's like, I'm going to be a scumbag. I've got to wake up, get in tuned and centered with the God of my own understanding. I have a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. The dictionary definition of reprieve means a stay of execution. If you're on death row getting ready to get the needle, and in the last minute you get a stay of execution, you don't die that day. You might die the next day, you might die the day after that, but that day, you don't die. And that's what I'm told here. 11, my sponsor tells me to start my days on pages 84 to 88, and I'm still trying to figure out why. He talks about if we have the proper attitude and work at it, this idea of meditation. What's the proper attitude to have about meditation? I used to think meditation was people that wore tie-dye and had dreadlocks, and come to find out that it's not just for that. Old idea. My sponsor gives me literature that's non-AA approved outside of that, that's daily reader based, and I'm not here to talk about that, but I was taught to seek in Alcoholics Anonymous. I wasn't taught, hide out in Alcoholics Anonymous and use everything in AA as a weapon to keep you from other experiences that you can have outside of here. So that's what I do, is I seek. And then 12, haven't had a spiritual awakening. Right, I had a spiritual awakening when I first got sober and went through the book with Rob, but what I didn't realize is that you can fall asleep in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I fell asleep. And today I had another awakening, another surrender, another deeper awakening, that I've taken the action to stay awake. I try to practice these principles in all my affairs and carry the message to other alcoholics. And what I can tell you is it's easy for me to show up to a meeting like this and look good and sound good for anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour. Because I'm the actor and the director. I know how to make it work. But really the most important stuff is what happens after I leave this meeting until the next meeting I attend. What I can tell you is I do the stuff in A that you tell me to do. I've got a homebrew, I've got a service position there. I'm the alternate GSR, which means I have alternate responsibility. I love that. And I show up and I participate where I'm supposed to participate. I sponsor other men in Alcoholics Anonymous. If you're not having an experience here, I suggest you just kind of get knee to knee with other men. Alcoholics Anonymous is the greatest show on turf. Greatest show on earth, excuse me. I've had some of the most phenomenal experience with the men that I sponsor. In this one story I'll just share, I sponsored a guy who had gotten out of federal prison. I've never been to federal prison. I called my sponsor. I said, this guy just got out of federal prison. I don't know how I can help him. And he let me know that I wasn't teaching him how to get out of prison. I was teaching him how to get and stay sober in Alcoholics Anonymous through the practicing and teaching of the principles outlined in the 12 steps. And what we did is we went through the work in Alcoholics Anonymous. We sat down to do a fifth step. On his fifth step, on his sex inventory was a young woman's name. The young woman was his daughter, who he had never met. And he said, I don't know what to do. I've harmed her. I've harmed the mother of my child. I've harmed the man that she chooses to call her father today. And man, I just want to make that right, and I don't know what to do. My great-grand sponsor, a guy named Joe Linehan, he's got like 9 kids from 9 different women. So he was the guy I knew to call. So I called him, and he said, look, you're going to send her a check every month. And at first, the only thing he could afford was like $5. So we sent a $5 check every month, and we didn't say anything about his daughter. We just said what he's trying to do in Alcoholics Anonymous. And after he paid, in increments of 5 and then raised up from there, he got a call from an unknown number, and it was the mother of his child. And she said that she was willing to allow him to participate in her life if he was willing to be the father that she deserved. And what happened is a couple Christmases ago, and it's at Tori and ours house. He sent me a holiday card, and in that holiday card was him and his now wife, their infant son Joseph, her son from a previous relationship, and then his 13-year-old daughter, Brinley. And I've got no responsibility for that. I just show up and I take direction where I'm taking direction. And I get to watch stuff like that. I get to watch boys become men, become sons, become brothers, become fathers, become employees, become employers. And it's something I couldn't miss. But what I can tell you is outside of Alcoholics Anonymous, there have been times where Tori's asked me why I don't treat her like the men that I sponsor. I still fall short on a regular basis, and I'm working on that. But what I can tell you is my mom doesn't cry herself to sleep anymore. My mom, she was working at Hallmark stocking cards when she found out and got the call that I had killed somebody. My dad, he was a manager at Cracker Barrel. He got called working the mid-morning afternoon shift that he got a call that his son had killed somebody. My brother was in high school. My brother's 2 years older than me. He's the most phenomenal man I've ever met. He was on summer vacation, and he went back to high school that year and endured hellacious torture because of what I did. And they didn't want anything to do with me. And I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and what I was convinced I needed was a minimum wage job where I could just make some money because I need money. I need a place to stay. I need a relationship. I don't care about anything else. And I needed those felonies off my record. And my sponsor told me, Lucas, we're going to do God's work and let him handle the rest. What an answer. And that's what we've done is God's work and let him handle the rest. My mom calls me on a weekly basis. Part of that 8-step process I had with my sponsor is my mom paid for a trial lawyer when I went to trial for murder. And they're not cheap. And my sponsor told me I needed to pay her back every single penny that I owed her. And I said, well, why would I do that? Good parents pay for good lawyers. And without skipping a beat, he said, good kids don't kill other kids. And I have the opportunity to build a relationship with my mom, and I'm here to tell you my mom could care less about the money. It's just about the opportunity to talk to me, to see me, to hear that she loves me, or to hear that I love her. My dad, I remember my uncle telling me an experience where my Uncle Bruce was talking to my dad, and my dad looked at him and he said, I wish my son Lucas would just go away. He is ruining my name. And how much pain he must have been in to say that. My dad today, he blows my anonymity every chance he gets. If there's someone looking to kill me in Alcoholics Anonymous, they'll know where to find me because my dad lets them know. And he doesn't understand anonymity. We've tried to tell him a couple times. But he's so fired up about what AA's done for me and what AA's done for the people in my life. And my brother, I have an amazing relationship with my brother today. He's one of the smartest guys I know. He's one of the most amazing. He is the most amazing man I know. And when I sat down to do my 8-step approach, 9-step approach with my brother, my brother really doesn't say he loves me. He just told me that we're good. And my brother reaches out to me on about a weekly basis, and he'll send me some funny article, and he'll just talk to me for about maybe 15 minutes, text back and forth. And I didn't deserve that. I used to be a guy who literally could not stop drinking for the life of me, and I'll never forget that. And the reason I love Alcoholics Anonymous and do what I do in Alcoholics Anonymous is because I believe one day I'm going to get called home to the big meeting upstairs, and on that day, God's going to have one question and one question only. Lucas, on July 28th of 2010, I gave you a gift. What did you do with it? Well, on that day, I hope I have an answer. When I first got sober, I just wanted back in my mom's house. And since I've experienced what you guys have to offer, I just want back in God's house. So thank you for letting me share.